Hello and welcome to Film School Podcast for episode 26 this Wednesday, the 3rd of February 2021. For those of you who don't know, the Film School Podcast is a podcast where we talk about all the films we've watched throughout the week, and then we jump into two main topics, and this week's films are Sweet River, the Australian film, and The Merger, another Australian film. I'm joined by a great group of guests. We have Josh J. Luke. How you doing, Josh?
Good, thanks, mate.
That's good. We also have the final girl, Emily Pratt. How you doing, Emily?
Thank you, Adam.
That's good. And last but not least, we have the rom-com expert, Chris Birchie. How you doing, Chris?
Yeah, really good, mate. Thanks.
That's good. All right. So if you want to follow us on all podcast services, we're everywhere. We also have the YouTube channel. And if you're watching live, that's pretty cool. We stream live every Wednesday when we do go live directly to YouTube. Alternatively, you can follow us on social media platforms at Film School Pod on Twitter and Instagram. All right. So what did everyone watch this week?
So I just was sitting around and couldn't decide what to watch on, I think it was last Thursday or Friday, and I just had the Blu-ray for Cowboy Bebop, the movie, in there, and the show itself is one of my favourite shows of all time, and I hadn't watched it for ages, and the thing that always turns me off rewatches the television shows is having to commit the time, but I was like, I've got 2 hours to watch this movie, so I put it on, and yeah, it's 2 hours of Cowboy Bebop. Anyone who has any idea what that's like would know exactly what this feels like to watch. It's just essentially an elongated episode that fits into the show, and it's great. Super cool. I'm really probably not telling anyone anything that they don't know if they're even interested in this, but yeah, it was great.
Yeah, see, Cowboy Bebop's always been one of those like animes that's totally like been on my radar, but I've never sat down and watched it. It still holds up, I presume.
Oh, it's amazing. I watched the whole thing a couple of years ago again, and it's got so many good things, especially for the time. And I am one of those people who I don't mind when shows get cancelled early, especially when they're super, super good, because you'll only ever remember how good it was, and it didn't have time to get terrible. And that's sort of what Bebop holds up as, I would say.
All right. Well, maybe I jump back into that series when I get a chance. All right, Emily, what did you watch this week?
Not much, to be honest. I don't know. I rewatched the film adaptation of Mice and Men last night, which was pretty solid. I don't know. I've read the book as well, and I'm teaching it at the moment, so I was obviously a bit more critical than I would be usually. But yeah, it's cool because the book's only 100 pages, so it takes you, between an hour and a half to 2 hours to get through that. And then the movie's also the same length pretty much, so they stay pretty true to the text. There's a lot of original dialogue, which I liked. But then on the flip side, I think it does kind of not do some things quite as well as the book, obviously. And just kind of loses a bit of the complexities in some of the characters and stuff like that. But we'll be watching it with my students most likely, because it is a good adaptation. So yeah.
Do you do this every year, or is this something that a film that changes or
This one's been on the part of the curriculum for the last 5 years, but I haven't taught it for a couple of years, so yeah.
Okay. No, good to dive in.
I remember I didn't read Of Mice and Men until I was an adult, and I just loved it when I read it. Yeah, as you were saying, read it in one sitting, just front to back, really quickly, and then I watched this after it, and yeah, I probably couldn't agree more from memory. It was fine, but it doesn't have the same feel, I suppose, as the book. And because the book is it is a simplistic story, it doesn't necessarily come across that interesting on film, I don't think either.
Yeah, true. I don't think it was as impactful as reading it, but that's again probably just me because I do like reading. But yeah,
I've seen the play though. The play's really good. I think it obviously takes a little bit more time to get into what makes the story really great, and I suppose that would depend on who you've got in as well when you see it.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, definitely everyone read the book if you haven't.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
amazing.
it's a staple, I
Completely
think,
holds up.
especially if it's part of the curriculum, right?
Hmm.
All right, Chris, did you watch anything this week?
Well, I watched Of Mice and Men as well, and I hadn't read the book, so a bit different than last week, where with To Kill a Mockingbird, I'd read the book and kind of got the same feelings as Josh and Em there. But with this, yeah, like I think I liked it a little bit more, but that was probably because I didn't know what was going to happen. So I went in there pretty blind. I didn't know the plot at all. So yeah, I found some of the parts quite impactful, especially the character Lenny, the one who has a learning disability, and a few things that happened with him was quite well done, I thought. But yeah, like I can definitely see if you read the book a lot of the time, the movie doesn't quite live up to it.
Can you
Yeah.
guys think of any
The other thing
example? Sorry, you go. Keep going.
No, you go. No, no, go.
I was just going to
You're
say,
going to
can you
say
guys
of
think of any
movies that are better
examples
than
where
books.
movies that are better than books?
Instantly that came to mind was like Harry Potter, but that could be because
Oh,
like I
how
hadn't
dare
read the
you.
book since a child.
How dare you, Rob?
I well, a lot of not bad books, but a lot of quite mediocre books were made into great movies.
Hmm.
So, like The Godfather's based off quite a long and quite boring book, historically speaking.
I don't know, the movie's quite long and has some pretty boring bits in it too, though,
I
mind you.
couldn't agree less with that. It is so much less boring than I remembered it to be when I watched it last
I
time.
haven't seen it in years, so maybe I'm not the best person.
Of good movies, probably The Shining comes close, but the book's so great as well. It's almost like comparing a perfect thing to a perfect thing, but
Yeah.
not many. I'm sure there's some out there that I'm not thinking of. Though.
Yeah, I'm sure there are.
What about The Lord of the Rings?
It's a pretty darn good adaptation. I feel like there's lots of like minute details that the books miss out on, like about the history and the lore of like why things happen and exist. But I would say it's a very, very, very good adaptation.
Tolkien didn't like metaphor, so a lot of the writing can get a bit
Yeah, and he
bland
didn't
from
love the
time to
films
time.
too, but he said that
Who?
film was a joke. Tolkien.
Oh yeah, I thought you were talking about he didn't love the Jackson films. I was like, he was well dead before that.
Yes. Did you know that as an aside fun fact, the Beatles tried to get the Lord of the Rings rights to make their own
No.
film out of it?
Did know that, yes.
Yeah. Anyways, so this week I watched two films that I wanted to talk about. So I watched Escape from Alcatraz, a Clint Eastwood film from like 1979. It's essentially just a prison breakout film. It was quite good, very stressful, very slow and methodical, but as like I don't know, there's always something so intriguing about a prison break. Although I feel like we've finessed it over the last probably half a century, there were lots of like scenes where I was like, "There's no way they wouldn't get caught." But I guess that's all based on a real story, and they did escape. Whether they survived or not, no one knows the answer, but it was quite good anyways. And then the next film that I watched was The Equalizer with Denzel Washington. And mate, this needs to be set in the John Wick universe. Essentially, the premise is he's a badass guy who has gotten out of like some sort of secret underworld where he's like a super crazy killer. And he's been out of the game for a long period of time, and then some like prostitute friend has been bashed by some Russian mobsters, and all hell is unleashed. And I feel like the whole film was like probably made by a bunch of like, I don't know, bunch of people just sitting in a room just being like, let's make him walk away. Let's make a guy walk away from explosion. I've got like all these ideas for like these hilarious action scenes where we use nail guns to like shoot nails across a room and into someone's leg. And then they just sort of wrote a story around it. But I could definitely see it being part of like the John Wick universe. And yesterday they added Equalizer 2 to Netflix, and that is sitting at number 1 on the top movie list. So I can't wait to watch that because it was just like your stupid fun action flick. Definitely not like going to win any awards, but if you want to waste, I think it was about an hour and 50 minutes, and you just want to have like a really lackluster story but a crap ton of action, it was really good. Yeah, so did anyone watch anything else?
No, that was it for me.
All right, let's jump into the main films of the week. Okay, so we're going to start off with Sweet River, the 2020 horror mystery thriller film where a mother's love can't be buried. It's directed by Justin McKillen with writers Eddie Barrow and Mark Fernie. It stars Lisa Kay, Eddie Barrow, Chris Hayward. Who else is there? Martin Sachs. That guy from Blue Heelers whose name doesn't seem to be listed.
You just said it.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, Martin Sachs. Yeah.
This is how
You
much.
mean the cop? Maybe Rob
Yeah,
Carlton.
the cop. He was also in A
Rob
Moody
Carlton.
Christmas. There's no information on the budget of this film. It's an Australian film that went straight to Netflix. And why don't you lead us away with the plot?
So this plot summary is courtesy of Craig Matheson from flicks.com.au. The
Thanks,
setting for
Craig.
Sweet River, an uneasy independent horror film, is the cane fields of Queensland. A flat, lush, subtropical landscape where thickets of cane, taller than any person, stretch into the distance like an impenetrable barrier. It doesn't look like anyone can get in, and as evidenced by the opening scene's increasingly panicked local, who doesn't last the night, getting out might be a problem too. When Hannah Montague arrives in the town of Billings, the English expatriate tells locals she's merely after a change of scenery. But her real purpose is soon revealed. Hannah has come to where her infant son went missing years prior, the victim of a long-caught local serial killer. She wants both her child's remains and closure. And that's it in a nutshell. Thanks, Craig Matheson.
Thanks, Craig.
Yeah.
Cheers.
All right. Josh, tell us what you thought of the film.
I didn't love this film. I was sort of tossing up at the end whether I even liked it slightly, but it had a few redeeming qualities. I started off a little bit interested, especially after the first couple of scenes, but it slowly went nowhere for me and ended up ending nowhere as well. I think it was I think I wrote in my review, I think it was sloppy and unfocused, is sort of my overarching thoughts on the film.
All right, Emily.
Yeah, like I was quite hopeful the whole way through. Like I was definitely like intrigued and like, oh yeah, like I wonder where this is going. Like I never felt scared at any point, but like I think there were a few parts that were like a little bit creepy, especially like the kids. I feel like kids in a horror movie is like automatically going to be like creepy to some
A little bit
degree.
unsettling.
Yeah. But yeah, I was kind of, it was all like, it all came down to the ending for me because I was like, okay, they're either going to pull this off and I'm going to be like, yeah, it's not bad, or it's going to crash and burn. And yeah, it just didn't.
It didn't do anything.
Yeah, it didn't do anything. And like, there was no satisfying like resolutions or conclusions to anything. Like, I was still kind of like, oh, okay, like, yeah, it didn't go where I hoped it was going to go, I guess you could say.
All right, Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like I sort of was going back to a kind of Rebecca Gibney type crime scene investigation type show is what it felt like to me. One of those sort of late 90s, early 2000s. But the actual horror part didn't really come to the forefront that well, I didn't think. So the same as what's been mentioned about it, not really, it kind of all building up to not overly much. Yeah, that's probably my main thoughts on this movie. And there did feel like there's a couple of just parts that were, I don't know, kind of glossed over a little bit. Like, I don't know, right at the start, seemed like a massive scene at the start with the guy who crashes his ute and then gets pulled into the cane fields.
Yeah, never talk about him ever again.
Nah, that's what I mean.
Everyone's
And
just fine with him being dead. I was like, what? Like no one even acknowledges it, really.
Yeah. I actually think that was part of the storyline, though, with the
Like,
once it goes into the field,
work,
you're gone. Yeah.
And that they try and ignore like happenings that they know are related to it.
Yeah.
So as the season,
I just didn't get how they knew because, like, he was obviously talking in the pub about what was happening, but I know that the spirits or the people in purgatory can hear what's happening, but it just kind of seemed a bit, how did they know straight away? And
There was a lot of this movie that they didn't think through, I don't think. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think, Adam?
Well, as the seasoned horror expert, I can say
Mhm.
that you can go ahead and watch this without being scared at all. There is I found none of it terrifying, like not even like a smidge, and that's coming from
I,
me who gets scared.
I thought you would have been getting a bit scared at the first scene, thinking what might
Me
Oh,
too.
yeah, sorry. So the only scene in the whole film that was like a little bit tense was
The opening.
the opening scene. Also, while I was watching that scene, I was like cracking it really hard because I was like, why is he walking around with a red flashlight? Why is the lights on his truck red? And like, I will say, the only thought out part of this film that I thought they did well was they actually explained why they were using red light, even though it wasn't a great explanation, mind you.
Nation, like it kept the child demons away. Did they explain it more than that, or?
No, that was it. But
Yeah,
like,
see, for me, I was like, but how?
How did they know that?
How have we
Yeah, how did they
discovered a
work that out?
random
and
fucking
also
red
like,
light?
you can't see where you're going. Like, it did like yeah. So like it just didn't make a lot of sense. Also,
Yeah.
I feel like if you want to watch like a movie that has tall grass, go and watch In the Tall Grass. The
I was
Stephen
gonna
King
say
film.
that, yeah.
That is a much better film, which uses like not sugarcane, it uses corn, but very similar premise, much better and so much more well done.
And that was the point I was going to bring up. I was actually going to mention the Tall Grass because this movie seems like it was written by someone who's watched a whole bunch of Stephen King movies or read a bunch of Stephen King books and has taken like pickpocketing all the little things. There's Pet Cemeteries in there too, and I think this also
I even got like The
really
Shining because like the
Yeah.
woman was like communicating with them and like
Mhm.
I was like, yeah, they just
Yeah,
like drew in all these different ideas.
And not only that, it also tried to fit into the vibe of the sort of horror that Australia's been doing really, really well recently. I know Chris and I watched Relic last year that was super good and did well, stuck to the sort of vibe this was setting up at the start all the way through. It was really great because of it. The Babadook is sort of the classic example these days of really good, tense Australian horror, and stacked up against any of those, this seemed even worse. And even not really as a horror movie, even just as a movie, I found it sort of directionless in a lot of ways. It's like, oh, we've got some creepy kids, but oh, we've got a mystery. And if it wasn't for good old PJ, I would have even given it a 2.5, to be honest.
Yeah, like I think it definitely had like all the ingredients of like a decent horror movie, but they just didn't really like utilize them well.
Or at all, really.
Yeah.
Hey, just to add to all that, the red light, obviously red means stop. So that's, that's what the spirit thing was. Red light, stop. That was,
To be honest,
that was the thinking behind it.
to be honest, with the level of thought that went into some of the writing in this movie, that seems like the metaphor they were going for.
Pretty plausible.
So, yeah, I'm buying it.
Also, just
Hey,
like the woman looking for her son's remains, like what she didn't have a plan. She was just like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna rock up in the town and find them.
Also, start a bushfire in central Queensland. That's a real good idea.
Yeah.
True.
Fucking hell.
I actually got frustrated at part 2 where like the spirit of Violet, so Martin Sachs, what was his name?
Daughter.
John's daughter, and what's the girl, Eleanor? The like somehow the shoes got to them, but like the son wasn't like able to move around because he was like the others are all in purgatory, but the son
Dead.
isn't. The son is actually the son's actually properly dead.
So
So how did the
What?
shoes come? And then why did the son ask for the shoes to come back? And then she didn't bring the shoes either. That was what I didn't get. It was
I
also
know
weird.
Violet said she bought the shoes to his door, and then she took to her door, and then she took her to the body to show that, I think to show that the son wasn't like the others, and that's when we found out that he was murdered.
But they actually also said to bring the shoes with you. Like it said the kid Joey wants you to bring the shoes back. She didn't bring the shoes.
Yeah, true. I think it because my sort of guess to that would be they didn't want any evidence of
Yeah.
that she had an actual thing to be searched.
Yeah.
That's sort of what I. But again, that was a lot of me making plausible
Assumptions,
The movie
yeah.
didn't make for us.
And also, like, so was it the river that made the kids ghost kids? Like, did
Never explained
Joey? Yeah, like, was
Yeah.
Joey not a ghost because he like didn't drown in the river? He was like killed, or
Literally never
Well,
explained it. I'm
yeah.
pretty sure.
Oh,
anyone
but,
that got trapped in the
yeah.
bus, I think the bus was the thing, apparently. So if you got trapped in the bus, you became a ghost kid.
But nah, but
why?
that other
drown in
kid
the
wasn't
river,
in the
like
bus.
what's that?
The older kid wasn't in the bus though. He
He got
was
hit
the
by the
one.
bus.
Yeah,
Oh well, yeah, bus. It's got anything to do with the bus.
It was
The
a
magic
magic
school
bus.
bus.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
magic school bus. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's another book or something about that, isn't there? The
Mm.
Magic School Bus.
Mm.
Magic School Bus was a great TV show when I was a kid.
Hey, also another thing, in the tall grass, I don't think that was very good either. I know you guys have said it was good, but I just had
I
a
mean,
quick look.
we're talking
It's
about
got lower ratings than this.
by
It is
comparison.
not a worse movie than this.
Yeah, it's
by
actually
any
got
means.
lower ratings than this though, which is pretty
But
bad.
it would have higher. It would have a higher number of reviews. I think. Sweet
Yeah,
River
there'd be more
only had
reviews, yeah,
about-
because it was Stephen King adaptation.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Well, I think the thing with In the Tall Grass, with what I found, we may as well get on to a little discussion about that, is for such a stupid plot and everything, it just goes to show that Stephen King and I think his son Joe Hill wrote that with him, that they can make a plausible horror movie out of literally anything. They made
Yeah.
grass,
Tall grass.
a villain and it worked. And
Yeah.
it's by no means one of the better Stephen King movies, but when it came up on Netflix, I was like, this is going to be horrible. And I gave it a watch, and for 3/4 of it, I was like, you're right to be.
Mm.
Whereas this, I was thinking for the whole time, this feels like it should be so much better.
Yeah.
Wonder where the budget comes into it at all too. Like, I mean, the story writing would have been better, obviously Stephen King, but I'm assuming the budget for this would have been a lot lower than the
It
Tall
wouldn't
Grass.
have been Into the Tall Grass wouldn't have been massive, but the thing with this is though, because they may have like sort of decided what they were going to do with the story based around the budget, but I don't think the budget being low really affected this much at all. I don't know. I think it feels like the person who came up with the story had an idea for a concept and then tried to write a whole narrative around it, and they just couldn't figure out where they wanted to go with it. That's how I felt anyway.
Well, we definitely can all agree that there are better things to watch, but
Yeah.
like, let's move on to the next film. Got nothing else to add.
There are better things to watch. It wasn't the worst. I'll say that. I'm giving it a hard time.
Still
Yeah.
give it a watch.
Yeah. Like I don't know. I would argue that maybe we shouldn't do horror films as part of the main movies of the week, but I know that I will never win that argument.
I would argue that we didn't do a horror movie.
Yeah, I would argue that we didn't do a horror movie, so maybe
Movie of the week.
All right, let's move on to the next film. So the next film is The Merger, a 2018 Australian comedy drama film by director Mark Grenatle. It's a screenplay by Damien Callahan and stars Damien Callahan, John Howard, Kate Mullivan, and was released at Melbourne's Film Festival. Why don't you take it away with the plot, Chris?
Well, this review is courtesy of myself, so credit to myself for this this review.
Thanks, Chris.
No worries, guys. So essentially, there's a country country town with a country football town that, like what happens in a lot of small towns around Australia and probably the world, is kind of forced into a situation to either merge or fold. There's an ex-AFL player named Troy Carrington who has a kind of, I suppose, love-hate relationship with the town because, they call him Town Killer because he apparently tried to sort of stop a timber mill or some sort of logging type thing happening. So the town kind of dislikes him. So against their better judgment, as in the town, he actually takes on the local footy team. And in doing so, because they need players, and also there's a little bit of an incentive to have players that seeking refuge or asylum seekers in the team. He manages to build a team full of locals and asylum seekers. Then it's all about the bonds and everything that occur there, and the differences, and people sort of seeing life in a different aspect and different opinions. And it's just really heartwarming the way that they bring the town together, and also bring, I suppose, the people haven't been locals, have seeked asylum in the town, and they all it all shows a kind of light of racism, and being able to see each other for who you are, and stuff like that. A bit of a fact about it is it's set in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales. And that's actually an official refugee welcome zone since I think it was 2012. So there's basis behind it there as well. Yeah, that was my review, which I think I needed to get the review from the other bloke, because that was all off the top of my head.
It was perfectly fine.
Great.
Craig's review of the merger would have been way worse. Don't worry.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Fuck you, Craig.
So I guess I assume you love this, Chris.
Yeah, I did quite like it. I think you guys all gave it a slightly better rating than me, but I did really enjoy it. It was, as I said, it was really heartwarming, and it was just I suppose they didn't really address the racism so much, but they did a lot of sort of bonding activities and stuff where I suppose the locals got to see what the lives of the refugees were like in their home cities and towns. So it did a good job, I think, of not preaching the message, but you could definitely see the message there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Josh, you were saying that you liked it before the podcast started. Tell us why.
Yeah, I really quite like this movie. Chris summed it up in a lot of ways. It has so much heart. It reminds me of just your feel-good sports movies that we're used to. But I think while having a very, very good message, it tells it in a easy to digest. And once again, as Chris said, not too preachy of a way. I think in terms of the way this movie addresses racism, it does it in a way that I find a lot more realistic to a way to address it, especially in a small town like this. They played off the more the ignorance of the ignorance and the bigotry of not knowing someone else's story rather than just preaching sort of ideals. And it was good to see a movie that sort of, instead of just preaching a message, showed a way in which sort of dialogue can happen and a way of doing things. And I found it really, really nice.
Yeah, I was just gonna jump in on that. Like, it's very confronting, like the racism, like in the way, but like we've all
100%.
seen it, but it was very realistic. Like just like even the way that like they pull down the window and say like refo and stuff like that, and then drive off with their Ford Falcons. Like, I don't know, it just that came off as like really raw, and I actually I think on reflection of the film, like at first it was quite shocking that like that was like highlighted as such a big thing, but then I guess when you put it into the context of like, no, like that's actually just what happens. Like, people are just blatantly racist like that, especially in country towns and in Australia.
Well, I thought that's what I felt like. I felt when I was watching this, I was like, I feel like I've seen this happen before. I've been in situations where this is the sort of majority opinion, and it's weird. I suppose at least in recent years we're trying to step away from it more, but when you do step out into the more maybe rural areas or things like that where people aren't as accustomed to the multiculturalism, it is still quite confronting like this. And yeah, I think it addressed it well.
Yeah, I also liked like the old guy, and
John Howard.
Yeah, John Howard. I liked the way that, I don't know, I feel like we all know those people who are really stuck in their ways, but I thought that the progression of like him coming around was quite well done, and it didn't seem too much. I don't know. Emily, anyways, what were your thoughts?
To you guys, I thought it was quite good. Like, it was interesting. Like watching it, I was kind of like, be like a really good movie, like really engaging sort of movie to show like high school kids, like to kind of get them thinking
Absolutely.
about like refugees and diversity and multiculturalism and all that sort of stuff. Because I think it was like really relatable for like yeah, a lot of people, I guess, that especially if you're from or have been to, like country-ish towns and that sort of stuff. As you guys have said, like, yeah, we've all kind of witnessed some of the stuff that like kind of happened in it. I just thought it was like, quite accessible and relatable, and yeah, it was good.
See,
Go ahead.
I was just about to say, like, I think that like kids would get so much more, at least Australian kids would get so much more out of seeing a film like dealing with racism like this in a school curriculum compared to
Yeah.
like when we watch those American films that are very much based like in olden days, right? Like you said, To Kill a Mockingbird, right? Like,
Or like Remember the Titans or something like that.
yeah. Like, why wouldn't like you show a 2018 film that's shot on like in 1080p, probably even as a good starting point, but then also super relatable, being around football and highlighting
And also-
actually what's happening in real, like in 2018 and even now. Like,
Yeah, like,
I
it's
don't know
all
if you
very
guys saw all
relevant.
that Collingwood news like over the last
Oh
2 days.
yeah, I was
It's just
gonna
like
say-
this is the movie to show in schools. Like, why aren't we doing this?
To be honest, I might
and-
actually show my VCAL class at some point during the year because they're a real sporty bunch, so I reckon they'll really like it.
Yeah.
It's 100%.
Yeah, you definitely should show it. And I think the part that Adam was saying about some of the parts being confronting, I think that's the good part about it, because a lot of kids do still talk like that. So when they see this in a movie and they can actually kind of see how ridiculous, like the way that they're acting or the way that they're speaking, and then they can see how the movie kind of slowly addresses it with I suppose the coach being kind of like a facilitator in getting the players into situations where they do see each others point of views and cultures.
Well, that goes.
So yeah, I reckon definitely great.
That goes into what my favorite scene in the whole movie, and it's where the real arty white guy with the long red hair sat down and told the story of the refugee in front of the group, and he was crying through it. I was like, this is a very, very well thought out and well written scene, and I was very emotional during it, just like he was, just because I was like, this is, and they did it a couple of times throughout the movie where they're like, what's the worst thing you've ever been through? Oh,
Yeah.
my guinea pig died. I can't remember what exactly he said. And then the other guy was talking about escaping war zones. And I think that is a really good thing to highlight to the younger generation. And just credit to Damien Kellen in this. He was great acting in it. I thought his character was fantastic. He hit the tone perfectly. And superbly written movie as well. And it does get a little silly towards the end, but it's not sort of it doesn't miss the point. Like, the game itself doesn't matter. That's sort of the whole point. Is trying to get across.
It's all about community, and it's all about
community. And I actually quite like the silliness of the final game and how they addressed it and how they were like sort of bonding in a way.
I like the goat thing that they do, that little fall over thing. The goat that distracts the other team and they keep
You know
going.
what? If you did it once in a game, it may actually work.
Yeah, just can't do it more than once.
Yeah, you can't do it more than once.
Yeah. So
Hey, how good was the narrator, the little kid, Neil Barlow, I think his name was,
He
it Rafferty?
so good, I thought.
And the
Fantastic.
humour too he had. It was quite good.
Yeah.
Didn't come across out of place at all in the film.
Nah. Typical Aussie young, not bogan, but like, you know what I mean, like real country sort of
I'll say
character.
a bit bogan, but
Yeah.
not even a bit bogan, but he
quite.
just had he used the terminology which sort of fit perfectly.
Yeah.
Like, what's a flog? It's worse than a wanker, but not as bad as a dickhead or something.
That was
like
good,
that.
Yeah, his name's Rafferty Greason, is the actor's name. I was gonna say I even quite liked, like, even in the final footy match, just like all the conversations that were happening on the footy fields and how to distract people was really just like talking about their hobbies and their lifestyle. I thought that was, it wasn't like they were like giving each other shit on the field. They were just distracting them with like their real lives.
I actually used to do that playing footy.
And
Absolute
then
crap to the other player and put him off.
I understand why they did it, but I would have loved to have seen, that absolute dipshit guy. What's his name? Can't remember what they called him.
The forward, was it? The full
The
forward?
one who was in the pub at the end.
Yeah,
Basically.
yeah. And like I
Carpenter,
understand why they
Carpenters.
did that and left him in the pub. It would have been I would have liked a little bit of like a redemption arc, but I understand that like the message of the film really is that like you do this, you're not part of the community.
I think I preferred doing it exactly
The way
the
that
way
they
they
did
did it. Because if they had it done it the other way, you would have had a situation where everyone was.
Making it
Remember
acceptable.
the Sam Rockwell thing from Three Billboards? You had the exact opposite sort of opinion.
That's
when
true.
They did
That's
give him a
true.
redemption arc. So
Yep,
I
that's
think
true.
this one addressed it as
As
good
well
as it
as
could,
good.
and because I think throughout the movie they give him plenty of chances. They give him a chance at every turn, and he doesn't take it, and he
Yep.
continues his bullshit behavior.
Yep.
And at the end, he's like, "No, you've had every chance to change. You've had every chance to adapt, and you didn't. So
Yep.
now you get to miss out on something that you
Yep.
wanted to do."
Yep. Actually, yeah. That's a really good point.
Yeah, I thought this was a very well thought out movie in a lot of ways.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. I also like that the song that they changed the song to Let's Have a Beer to Let's Have a Cordial.
Yeah, that was
Really
that was
smart,
nice.
really well done.
I know I might be a bit biased, but they used the Richmond song as the base for the club song, so I was happy with
It's a
that.
good song.
I was gonna say I think it is as I don't think it's quite so biased to say that we have the best song in the league because I think it's been voted it for
Yeah,
like the
you
past
don't
20
need to
or
say
30
that's
years.
that's hands down the best song.
They could have used the Freo one. Wish they'd used the Freo one. Definitely the best one.
Or the Gold Coast one.
The Giants have the Russia. It sounds like a Russian war song.
There was one quote that I did like, and I think it's all through the trailers and everything. The one that you said before, Josh, was probably my favourite. But the other one I did like is when the boy asks, Neil Barlow asks, "What's a merger?" And I think it's the comedian Nick Cody's like, "Oh, it's when one shit team joins up with another shit team to make a slightly less shit team."
Mm-hmm.
I thought that sort of was quite good humour there.
And I like how the title ended up being a metaphor for sort of more a way of life than the sort of literal translation of it too.
Yeah, like merging, the community merging, and
Mm-hmm.
the actual different cultures merging. Yeah,
I also found it super realistic, and I know that in a way it shows some different forms of racism, but I found it super realistic when the sort of opinions were starting to change around the refugees. That the grandmother was very like sort of not accepting but very interested in she was very accepting, but she was interested in doing things as sort of, oh, it's something new to try, something new to do. So she goes out dancing and she does everything. And then the old grandpa's like, no. I quite enjoyed that. Sort of true to life in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and like I guess like on reflection, like I think I was saying at the start, like before the podcast started to Josh that like I didn't really love it because it was like more of a football like film. But I would say that like even on reflection, like I enjoyed it, like because the football wasn't the main point.
And the skills in the football was terrible.
Yeah. So yeah, I recommend this. It would be great if we taught this to kids. I think that this is really.
We're starting it off. We're kicking it off. Teach the merger to kids.
I think I'm just going to put it into the health and PE curriculum. I'm just going to do it.
Yep.
I've got them like double on a Friday afternoon. Last double, we're watching the merger.
Done.
Easy
Friday.
It's a good way to spend a Friday afternoon, mate. You'll be like the most popular teacher in the world. Any final thoughts, Em? Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, everything's been said.
Cool. All right.
Sorry.
Any final thoughts? Anyone else?
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, let's round out that episode then. So thanks so much for listening to episode 26 of the Film School podcast. We go live every Wednesday with a new podcast, whether it's live on YouTube or if we are doing double episodes like we'll probably do next week, we will not be live at all. We'll just upload them. You can find us on all podcast services. Next week's films are Your Name, Bad Cupid, and I Lost My Body. Bad Cupid will just be a very short, quick review because we have got a limited screener to watch that. Thanks so much, and we will catch you next Wednesday. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.